Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. So this is the second video of my November 2024. This month's theme is making things that are a nod or a tribute or an homage to your cultural ancestry. So last time I did a flamenco dress. For today's video, I am going to go the opposite extreme to a many times great grandmother, and I'll throw a picture of her up here, who is Danish. And, you know, full disclosure here, I don't know anybody Danish. I have never been to Denmark or anywhere near there. I know absolutely nothing except for, you know, the furniture of Copenhagen, you know. So what I am going to be doing is my take in a nod to traditional Danish folk, I don't want to say costume, but folk wear. So this week, what I'm going to be doing is making a vest that has the lacings up the front, because I see that a lot in different photos. And so I think that that's going to be cool. And I am going to be using, hopefully I have enough, this green velvet. It's actually an upholstery velvet, and it's a scrap from the coat that I made a couple years ago. So hopefully there'll be plenty of that. I think that that will be lovely. It's this great emerald green. And I'm going to be using a pattern from my Lutterloh system. So if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like a draw your own type system, but it's basically this little vest here that they show quilted. And the reason I'm making that one is because in the ones that I've looked at online, it's basically from this point, I need it open. I'll put a panel behind and then put lacing to close it. Okay, so it'll be nice and snug once it's all laced up. But I think the basic design of that little simple vest is going to be what I need. So the first thing I need to do is get my table cleared off, put a bunch of paper down, because I need to draw my own pattern. Actually, I want to show you something. I got this roll of paper. This is, you know, not sponsored or anything like that, but I got this big old roll of paper from IKEA a little bit ago, and it was like $4 for a huge amount. Hang on a second, let me read the label here. 98 feet. It is a 98-foot roll for about $5, so I thought that was pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and use this, get my table cleared off, rolled it out, and then we'll get started drawing the vest pattern. Okay, so this is my little pattern piece. These two are the ones I'm going to be using. And what I need to do is measure my bust, because that's the measurement you use for this upper part. And you need to measure it in centimeters. And my two good measuring tapes that I always keep hanging up right there are both gone, which is really weird to me. Kind of freaking out about that because I don't remember moving them. But I measured my bust, and I am around 104 centimeters, okay? So, you know, a little more, a little less, but because I'm going to be lacing this, I'm going to call it 104. Okay, so what I need to do is I have my little piece of cardboard back here. I put a clear piece of tape across the little cross hatch points there to reinforce it. And the Lutterloh system comes with this special measuring tape, okay? So what I need to do is get their little pin, and you know what, I am gonna need to tape this down. I don't want to push that down hard. But I put my little pin in the hole that matches up to my size. So 104 centimeters, put it in the little pin right there. Okay? And then, so let's say I'm going to do my vest front piece first. I put that pin in the little crosshatch piece here. Okay? And then as I go around, you see there is a little points. Let me see if I can zoom you in here. So maybe you can see there are little points with little numbers on them. And what I need to do is use those numbers by lining this up with the line next to it. But just to make sure I have enough room on my paper, the way I have it situated, I'm going to come over here. On this line it says I need to put a mark at the 11.5 point. Okay? Well, yeah, I have plenty of room there. How about up here at the top? I need to put one at 33.5. Yeah, I got plenty of room there. And over here, I do too. So, I'm not going to make you watch me. I'm just going to do that. Come out, use my pen, put a little, my drawing pen, I should say. Probably this. Put a little dot on my paper, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I play connect the dots. Okay, so let me go ahead and take this off now. This is just my front piece, but you know, once you've seen the front, the back should make sense too. Now, if you remember, I didn't mark this little point, the apex point, all right? But I did put a stick pin straight through it, and it is right here, okay? So basically with this system, if you know how your body proportions work with a standard pattern company, pretty much the same modifications you would need to make for that, you would need to make here, okay? Because they just base it off of a standard body shape. So for me, the apex point is about an inch or so lower because of gravity, you know? So that's what I am going to do. But first, what I need to do is play connect the dots. So keeping this handy, I can see that I'm going to connect three little points here. That's going to kind of make a curve. And then a lot of it is straight. And then we have these corners here. And they give you this little line so you can see what should be squared if you were to line them up. I'm thinking. So give me a moment. I'm just going to draw all of my connections here, and then I will show you what that looks like once all that is done. Okay, I'm still drawing. Around my armhole, I am going to try to use my flexible curve, you know. I usually try to line up 3 dots at a time, and that gives me a nice curve. And I wanted to point out that this is the stitching line. If you use this system, you do need to add your own seam allowance to it. So what I'm drawing here is just the stitching line. So just a sec. Okay, so now I have that curve. Ooh, that totally missed those dots down there, didn't it? I did not even see them. Oh, Marie. Okay, hang on a sec. All right. Oh, that's so much better. Okay, so just ignore this right here. So once I get this on, then I'm going to come back and add my seam allowance. Right there. Okay. Yeah, that's it. So that's the dot that came with the pattern, all right? And I want mine to be lower. This little line right here is showing the grain line. So before I actually change where this position is, I am going to cut this pattern out like this and lay it so that, if you can see here, the grain line is like parallel to this line out here. Oopsie, sorry about that. So this is the grain line, and I want to move this dot down an inch. I want to move it down on that same parallel. So if this is the dot they gave me, I want it down an inch. Will give me 1 1/8 inches for fun. That's going to be my new apex point right here. Okay, and if you notice, I did not draw this line in. I'll show you why in a second. So from here, I'm going to draw this line this way, and this line this way, and that is going to be my dart, all right? But let me do a little bit of folding here to get this line put in here. And if I fold that, so it's going to come down and match up down here. Oh my gosh, this thick paper. I may just go back to using my tracing paper because this is kind of a pain. Not going to lie. All right, so this is how my dart needs to be, right there, okay? That has these two lined up. Now you can see, because I lowered that dot, this isn't lining up exactly. So I am now going to reconnect this top dot here to this bottom dot here. You know what? Let's see if this red pen will work so we can see that it is different, because that's the one we want, okay? Now, with that as my new line, if I come back at this point and cut it, oh, I should not have done that. That doesn't have my seam allowance in. I'll fix that in a minute. But if I cut it here, then I have this little poke out point there. So, because I was not supposed to do that, I need to tape all that back on and cut it again with the seam allowance included. So, if I fold this back, this red line is my stitching line. I'm going to do a 5/8 seam allowance just because that is what I am more used to. If you want to go for a 1/2 inch one at this point, go for it, okay? But with this is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance included here. All right, then if I cut this, that's my new cutting line. This is my new sewing line. I know, it's a lot, okay? And my paper wants to roll up and all of that. So what I need to do now is add 5/8 of an inch to all of these outside bits here, and then cut it out at that new seam line, or new cutting line, I should say. And if you've been around, you might know I like to use, I have a bad old measuring tape that I cut bits off of. But in general, and double check yours, in general measuring tapes are 5/8 of an inch wide, okay? Let's see if this one is here. Yep, this one is too. So what I use when I'm marking my seam allowances is just a little bit of tape that I can just move around like so, and then I'll connect those dots as I cut it out, okay? So that's marking my seam allowance. Now I know I am going to get comments from people saying, don't use your original Lutterloh pattern. Photocopy it and use the photocopy, which you can. Just make sure your photocopy is exactly accurate and not sized down at all. But for me, as long as I am careful and I reinforce things with a good tape and I don't cut into the paper at all, I think I'm fine. And I wanted to show you, like for a mark that it's up here, I just put my pin prick straight through. I can lift up the pattern, see where that is, and then put my mark, and then, you know, go on with my day. So all of those marks that I made on my front vest pattern, those are good, but I did make them with a heat erasable pen. So where I kind of screwed up that armhole and crossed it all out, I can just erase that with my iron, so that's all good. And the last thing is on these rulers, they're a little bit tricky, but what I have found is that, say this says 28.5, so the little centimeter that has the space is the space for 28. The line just above it is 28 exactly. The line in the middle is 28.5, okay? And then it gets to the next big line is 29. It's just a little bit different from your average. And oh my goodness, look, I placed this incorrectly. Oh, I'm gonna have to move it down a bit. Or actually, I'm just going to tape another piece of paper up here. I should have paid attention, but I didn't. Now, I am in no way a pro at using this system, but I've learned a couple things, and I've only probably used it maybe half a dozen times. But it's a handy little thing. But I can tell you, don't cut out your fabric until you have double checked that your seams are going to match. So I'm going to get my seam lines drawn, I'm going to get it roughly cut out with my seam allowance, and then we're going to match up the two pieces. Okay, so I've got my two pieces here, and I want to make sure that the seam lines are going to match up. So first, starting with my back piece, measuring this side seam, just the stitching line area, not the seam allowance down there. Okay, it is about 5.5 inches, a generous 5.5 inches, okay? So let's back that up on the front piece. If I put my thumb right back there at the bottom, bring this here, oopsie, I forgot, I made this wider, so I need to follow this red line out here. All right, so if I move this here, put my thumbnail there and move it up here, that does match. So my side seams should match. Now for this system, you kind of figure out how you're going to do it yourself. They give you some sewing points in the very beginning and like a little how to sew manual, but you have to figure it out. And I am going to line this. So basically I am going to be cutting out, you know, 2 of these out of my velvet and 2 of them out of lining. And the same for this. I'm going to cut 1 unfold out of my velvet and 1 unfold out of my lining. So let me go ahead and get that done. There's going to be another piece that is not shown on here that I'm going to be cutting out, but I'm going to do that after I have this pretty much assembled, which is going to be a little rectangle about this tall that's going to come over to about this point. And that's going to be like a little panel that's going to go behind all the lacing. Okay, but I'm going to cut that out later from an extra piece that I have. Okay, so I've got my front. This is the lining. Another remnant from a past project that I'm going to be using. It is 100% cotton and pre-washed. So I've got that. 2 of these, 1 of these cut on a fold. And I need to go downstairs and take care of some things. So next time I come up, we'll start putting it together. Okay, welcome back. It's been a couple days, been busy with other things as you do, but I am ready to get back into this. So basically, when you're doing a Lutterloh pattern system, you have to kind of create your own creation plan, you know. And if you are not really familiar with clothing construction, you might want to make sure you start with a very, very basic pattern, kind of like this. And also, since there's not really a set of instructions to follow, I highly recommend having a, you know, generic sewing guide kind of book. This is just one. I have many different companies do different things. You know, there's Vogue and Simplicity. This is Reader's Digest. I have textbook ones, lots of them. But the way that I am going to be doing this is basically, I'm going to be sewing the fronts to the backs of my velvet piece first. And so let me go ahead and get these placed. And I did cut it with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And oops, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to do is I need to put this pleat in the back of the shoulders here of this back piece. So I was just, you know, grabbing things and going. And if you look, that should have been a clue because that doesn't match up, you know. So with that, let me flip this over just like I do with my regular patterns. You're looking around. I'm going to go ahead and punch out the very center here of my dart, excuse me, with my leather hole punch, okay, and a piece of leather underneath it. This is a coaster, so that I won't damage any fabric. Also up here at the stitching line, and remember I made it slightly wider, but actually when I hold the pieces up, I think I'm going to do it like halfway. Sometimes you just make a judgment call. So I'm poking out those holes up there. And laying this down, I'm going to get a heat erasable pen. Just arbitrarily choosing blue today. Marking those 3 dots. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. And then coming back and drawing these darts in. Okay, I am going to go ahead and put my back darts into both my lining piece and my velvet piece at the same time, you know, that way while I'm on that train of thought. So if you can see here, I know it's very light, but there are my dots, there's my lines. That's going to give me my stitching lines. So let me go ahead and get all of these drawn on first, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now that I have everything marked, I'm going to show you on the lining piece just because it's easier to see. So here's my lines. I'm going to stick a pin down the first dot here and come back up the second one. Push that together. Come down here and pinch at the bottom of my little dart. Okay, it's going to give me a nice crease here. And at the bottom dot, anchor a pin in that way, and the same here, can anchor this in. Now when I sew these, I'm going to start at the outside edge and come all the way in this way, all right? This is thicker fabric and everything. I'll probably just do a tiny little back stitch here to anchor it in on this because, you know, it's fine. If I was using a very, very lightweight fabric, I'd probably just go off the edge and then hand tie the tails. But let me go ahead and do that for all of these. And then I'm going to show you how I'm going to press them, because I'm going to press them differently for my velvet layer than I am for my lining layer. Actually, before I go over there, I wanted to show you one thing. Thick fabric like this, especially something with a nap, like this velvet stuff, because this is a thick upholstery kind of velvet, all right? What I am doing is, yes, pinching it up here where the little point is and putting a pin there. But up here where I'm getting these two together, instead of anchoring this pin in that way, I am putting a clip. And the reason is when this is so thick and nappy, if I angle this pin to stick it in, it's actually gonna tweak this whole layout. See, it just wants to go like that. So instead, while this pin is just straight through, holding it all together, then I'm just going to put a little clip on it so nothing is going to happen. I can pull this out and I can still see where my little stitching line is right there. Okay, alrighty. And just to show you what I am using today, I am using Pearl, my fabulous Meister. And one of the reasons I want to use her is because she belonged to my grandmother. This is the one who is on the same side as of the family as the Danish ancestor that I am doing this vest for. And this used to be black. It was one of the first machines that I, got out of the rut of black paint and just, went nuts and painted a black machine pearl. And I think that expanded my horizons. So I'm going to be using her. I love her very much. And of course, my, 1980s version. Ooh. Kill that strobe light there. 1980s version of a serger because it works, Painted my wall because I wanted to. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick peek here. So there is younger me, my mother, my grandmother. She's the one that owned Pearl, okay? This is her mother. This is her husband's mother, okay? It is from this woman's ancestors that the Danish side is. Now, this is my father's mother, the one that I took the inspiration for the flamenco dress from. That is her mother, and that is her mother. So, there is my family in a nutshell. Okay, so actually, I did not backstitch. I just when I was getting close to the end, I decided that, you know what, it was getting a little tight. So I'm tying a knot here, and my fingers are moving very slowly. What I usually do is leave myself a longer tail, you know, but I did not this time. So I'm just making a big loopy single knot here. And while it's still a big loop, I'm going to stick a pin through that loop to the last stitch that I made, and then I can pull the tails, and it's going to cinch that knot in right down where I need it to be. Okay, and I can pull that pin out and clip the tails, you know, a little less than ½ inch long, and we are good. So for the lining, because it's a lighter weight fabric, first of all, I'm going to iron my whole piece here because it was kind of wrinkled. I am going to be pressing these pleats toward, or these darts towards the center back. Okay, just for funsies, because I think that that will look nice. All right, so that's what it looks like on the outside there. Now for this velvet stuff, first of all, I need to iron it because it's very wrinkled. So I use a lot of steam, okay, and not pressing really hard, just kind of coasting over the top with a lot of steam, and that seems to work pretty good on this velvety stuff. This is very thick, and so instead of pushing these one way or another, I'm actually going to open them up flat. So to make that easier, I'm grabbing my little wooden knitting needle here, and I'm going to stick that inside of this dart as far down as it's able to, and push it down flat. You know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to actually cut this open. Cut this open and do it that way. I'm not going to cut it all the way to the tip. I'm probably about 1.5 inches away there, but opening it up flat this way and then pressing that down. I think that will be better. And this is all about, you know, alleviating bulk, alleviating, you know, creases being seen on the right side here. All right, so pressing it that way, I think that that's going to work well. I'm not going to have a big ridge line on one side or another. So let me go ahead, finish ironing this whole piece, get this one pressed open like that, and I'll meet you back at the table. Okay, now I wanted to show you, because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes on a very floppy fabric what the purpose of these darts are. But on this one that has a boatload of body, those darts are definitely getting the shaping done. So, you know, for your shoulders, they're usually curved a little bit, and so that's basically working that curve in here. Because sewing a garment, it's like sculpture, you know, we are three-dimensional people, so that's what that helps do. So I just thought that was kind of cool how it's like sticking up like that. So setting my back pieces aside, I have 2 front linings and 2 front velvet, okay? And remember, there is this side dart here. So I'm going to do it just the same as I just did that little dart on the back, where first I punch out at the stitching line that I have drawn here in red, dot here, dot here, dot here, and then match them up. And again, just like I did on the back, so folding those darts up, sewing them from outside to the point, and I'm going to do that on both linings and both velvet pieces. So I want to show you this girl here. We've had, I think, 3 babies born so far this week. And this gal keeps leaving her baby up in the woods to take a nap, and then she forgets where she leaves him. So she's walking around and just yelling, looking for him, and so when he wakes up, he'll yell back. But if you hear a bunch of noise, that's what it is. She's looking for her little guy. Don't worry, they meet up really soon. Okay, so for this front part here, for the lining, because it's a lighter weight fabric, I am just pressing these darts down. You can see I'm kind of holding this up here because I want to maintain the shape. Is adding a bunch of curviness to that front, which I want to keep here. Okay. Oops, I just put a wrinkle in there. We're going to ignore that right now. Now for the thicker part, I started doing this off camera. I'll finish it here. I'm actually pinking it down to about a seam allowance width, whatever that shall be, down here. It's not exact, but it's close enough for me. And then, just like before, I'm going to press it open to this point, okay, and stick my knitting needle or whatever else you have in there so that you can bring it down flat and press it that way, okay? And I think that that should give me a nice, sorry about the steam there, a nice look on the outside. Alrighty, so let me get the other ones pressed. Meet you back at the table. Okay, welcome back. It's been a couple days. I've been busy working on machines and stuff, and I need to get this finished. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is putting my fronts to my backs of my outer part, my velvet part. And just a full disclaimer, my press-on nails are coming off, so yes, this is real life. This is not glamour shot sewing videos, you know. It is what it is. As they come off, they will come off. But what I'm going to be doing is for the outer part, sewing both the shoulder seams and the side seams. And I'm going to be stitching these at a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then pressing them open, you know, on both sides. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. I want to show you something on both sides, so I know it's just my pattern. My shoulder seam on my front is a little bit too wide, and so I'm just having it stick out on the armhole side, and I'm just going to trim that when I'm done. It's kind of a DIY pattern type thing. If it was on the back side, I would try to ease it in, because usually you ease in fullness on the back into the front, but you'd never ease in fullness in the front into the back on these shoulders, because that would just not work with human anatomy. So just letting you know, that's just going to get trimmed off and eased in. It's probably the same for my lining fabric, but that's not a big deal. We can just keep on going on. Okay, so I've got them sewed on, and I'm going to show you. I am just going to start down here and slowly bring it up. If I can do this neatly so that it matches, you know. It's going to be fine. It's a vest, for crying out loud. And another thing is sewing velvet to velvet, it wants to walk. It wants to push against each other on the nappy part and kind of go one way or the other. So troublesome fabric all the way around, but it is what it is. So let me go ahead over to my ironing board and get all of these seam allowances carefully pressed open. Okay, so over here at my ironing board, I wanted to point out something because this is very thick fabric. And this seam allowance is going to make it so it doesn't want to lay flat. Okay, just ignore whatever the dogs are barking at. It's probably a squirrel. Oh, perhaps I should go check. Yep, I think it was a squirrel. It is fall, and we have a big nut tree in our backyard, which has all the nuts have fallen and the squirrels are coming to collect it. You know, it's the circle of life back there. And the dogs are excited about it. So, as you can see, I just cut some of that seam allowance out. I left it up there. But that's going to make it so that I can press this open a lot better. Now, another thing, well, first let me give it a quick light press, throwing a bunch of steam on. I'm kind of hovering, not really pressing hard, all right? What I'm going to do is put my wooden spoon on top of that seam while it is nice and hot, because I don't want to really press hard for a long time on this seam because it's the velvet and you don't want to mark it. But pushing this right on that seam while it is hot, it kind of works like a miniature wooden clapper, you know, and it's going to hold that seam open and not do any damage out here, okay? So, love the wooden spoon. When I was a child, I did not, obviously. If you know, you know. But let me go ahead and do the same thing for these shoulder seam allowances. I want to show you, I just popped it onto my dress form just for a quick look, and it's looking like I want it to. I did not want these two to come together, and that's why I chose this pattern, because I am going to be putting a panel in there, and there is going to be lacing up and down each side. So for right now, it's actually looking like I wanted it to. And I think that these darts are going to the right position for my body and everything, so that is great. Okay, let's work on the lining. Okay, so the lining's going to be very similar except for one thing, and that is on one of the side, you pick which side. I'm not going to be sewing up the side seam. I'm actually probably going to sew it about 1 inch each way, but leaving the bulk of it open, okay? So we'll just pick this one. So from about this point out, I'll sew it, and from that point out, I'll sew it. The other shoulder seams are both going to be completely sewn, and this side seam will also be completely sewn. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to put these two right sides together, match up all the seam allowances. Oops, I need to go get my clips. Okay, so now I'm going to match them all up, and I'm going to match up my seam allowances, centers and the neckline and the center back and everything. And because I left this side seam open, that is the place where I'm going to be turning everything right side out. So first let me get it pinned together, and once I do, then I'm going to sew it all the way around the outside, and not the armholes yet. I didn't think this thing through all the way, did I? First of all, I need to apologize because I have not made a vest like this in so many years, and my brain just blanked out. So, unfortunately, I'm going to need to open up some seams, which is not a big deal. You know, they're short seams and everything, but if you are following along and doing this, don't sew your side seams yet. They are pressed open, so that's going to make my life easier. And you can see it doesn't take a whole lot to open these, but let me get the side seams on both my linings and my vest open, and then we'll sew it together the correct way to be able to flip it right side out. Okay, so that is done. So what we're going to do now is I've got my fronts up here, laying them on top of each other, backs down here. So I'm going to be sewing this in sections. First, I'm going to be sewing the bottom here to the bottom lining at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, okay? Then coming up here, sewing the armhole, again, making sure everything is lined up well, and I can see where that pressed open area should be, so I'm going to line up basing that, top seam, all that. Sew my armhole seams again at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then leaving the side open on everything. That's the side part that's open on it all. Coming down here, sewing the outside edge, the entire neckline, and down here to this outside edge at the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So let me go ahead and get that done, and then I will bring it back here to the table and the camera. Okay, so now that that is done, and I can tell you this fabric is a pain in the neck to get lined up, and I think I did as close as I can. Before I flip it, what I need to do is come in here, and wherever there's a curve, clip it, and so it's going to turn and lay flat. I could use pinking shears and trim it, but honestly this fabric is not fun to cut with pinking shears. So what I'm doing is just clipping up to like within 1/8 of an inch or so of the seam line, and I'm doing it pretty regularly here because this is a very stiff fabric and I just don't want any issues, okay? So let me get all of this clipped here. If it looks like there's a lot of bulk and you can trim it out, great. If you can use your pinking shears, great. This is just what I'm choosing to do here. Of course, I don't need to do that along the bottom because that's a straight line, you know, but around the neckline and everything, yeah, that's going to be a must. Even on these outside curves, technically what I should be doing on the outside curves, and you can see it did not line up right. It was just a headache, you know. But to take out bulk in the outside curves like this, I am cutting notches out, okay? And that way, when it wants to curve together, those notches are going to have space to just kind of come together like that, and it'll lay nice and flat. Once on these outside curves, I have enough notches in them, like this, and it's actually thin enough. I'm going to pink what is left there. Oh my goodness, that is tough. Tough stuff. So it's going to look like that. Okay, so that's how I'm doing outside edges. This is how I'm doing inside, and I will be back shortly to flip it right side out. Okay, for some reason my camera is falling. Get back up here. All right, I am going to try to flip this right side out. I wanted to show you I did, clip extra bulk out of the seam allowance there. I'm just reaching my hand up here inside from the back side seam, shoving all of this front in that shoulder seam. Very thick, so I can pull it out this back side seam opening, okay? And I should be able to flip this out the right way. I am not understitching this, obviously, but I will be very carefully pressing it so that it has a nice edge. So with all of the clips that I put in, I should be able to feel around while I am turning it right side out and make sure that nothing is going to get hung up, that I can get my nice corners and curves everywhere. So there is one side. Let me stick my hand in this side over here. Whoopsie. Over here. Grab the other and pull it right side out, and we'll see what it looks like then. Okay, so this is basically what it's looking like right now. This is the back. The bottom seam is sewn, side openings, of course, going to the front. And before I sew my side seams, I am going to very carefully press this, and I'm going to press it while I'm looking at the lining side. And I'm going to want to kind of roll it before I press it so that it looks a little bit like that on the outside edge, where I see just a little bit of the thicker outside fabric showing. And then when I press it, hopefully the lining won't peek out. If a little bit of it does, it is definitely not the end of the world, but I would prefer that it doesn't. So I will go ahead and press that all the way around, leaving these, of course, open and flat, and I'll be right back. Okay, so she's all pressed, and after I ironed it, I decided that I was going to serge my lining to my outside fabric here, and I'm just going to sew them together, regular fashion, not separating the lining from the outside. This is going to be a seam that's going to be under my underarm. Nobody's going to look at up there. And also, if I ever needed to adjust this for some reason, having this seam placed like this, with a seam line here and having this pressed open, is going to make it a lot easier to adjust, either taking that seam allowance in and out in order to get a right sizing, in case anyone else wanted to use this at some point. So I'm going to go ahead, get these side seams clipped together, matching up at that 1/2 inch seam allowance line right there the best I can, and get them stitched together on both sides. Okay, so once again I am in here, and I'm just going to press these seam allowances open. I'm going to steam them up quite a lot, and while they are hot and steamy, put my wooden spoon down, hold it down for just a little bit. I guess technically you're supposed to hold it until it's cool and dry, but that's not going to happen, okay? And so now it's going to be enough that I'm going to be ready to move on to the next step. So I'm going to pop this onto my dress form for now, just to get it used to its new shape. I need to charge up my microphone batteries, and I will be back later. Okay, so welcome to the next day. Slowly making progress on this. And this is feeling very small to me, but I have to remember that it is going to be open like that. So hoping for the best here. On the version that I'm doing, I am going to have it lacing back and forth. So instead of using like my brass grommet cruncher, which I could if I wanted to, I'm actually going to make hand finished little eyelet holes here. So where the top pin is where pretty much I'm going to want my top grommet or top eyelet to be. And where the bottom is where I want my bottom one to be. And I just did a really quick try on over my outfit the other day just to try it on. So that's where I came up with those positions. So if I measure that, that's 4.5 inches between. How am I going to place this? If I put them every 1 inch, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I put them every 1.25 inches, that's going to be 1, 2, 3. Let's do every 1.25 inches, and wherever it ends, okay? It doesn't need to be exactly right there. That's just kind of the position that I was eyeballing. So I'm just going to get some of my little red chalk here. And on the bottoms, I'm going to go ahead and mark where both bottom ones are going to be. Okay, so I've got those two little marks. And then I'm going to come up, see if I can do this with them close together so it will be easier here. Put my ruler so I am 1.25 inches here and put my second position. We're going to do it again at another 1.25 inches here, and then one last one. Oh my goodness, can I see? Right here. So that's going to be about 1/2 inch lower than when I was eyeballing it, but I think that's going to be fine. So at those positions, I'm going to use my hole punch that I use a lot for marking. And I've got several layers going on here, so I'm hoping that that is reinforced enough. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually punch out my holes. And I'm going to want them to be, get my ruler back over here. If I put my ruler so that at this point here, I have it at the 3/8 inch position, I think that's going to be good. Okay, so now I have little X's coming down there. Okay, marking my position. So let me go ahead and do it this way also. I think that's pretty good. Okay, now with that done, I'm going to stick my leather under there and come straight down, hoping for the best at this point because it is a point of no return. Oops, I need to screw that on. Okay. I'm going to do this until I have a hole. And there I have my little hole. Okay. Before I get things too out of sorts, I'm also going to come back and put a small dab of clear fingernail polish in the center of that hole. Just because I don't want it to fray, and that's going to help me out. Okay, so once I have all of my holes punched and with a little dab of fingernail polish or glue or whatever you're going to do, then I can go ahead and get my thread and strategize how I'm going to be stitching these. Okay, so I've got all of my little holes punched there. So that's a fairly small hole, so I'm going to take my awl here, stick it in the hole and push it up to widen it out some. If this was just a regular little woven fabric, I probably wouldn't even need to punch the hole. I could just stab that through and wiggle it, but since, you know, this is what it is, there you go. So now I have a bigger hole, and I was thinking of doing a really pretty buttonhole kind of stitch around it, but honestly, this stuff is so finicky and I think my stitches would get lost in there, so I might just do kind of like a whip stitch type thing around it. It's not going to be too fancy, just letting you know ahead of time. Okay, welcome back. Again, been a couple days. I got a lot of cool things going on, which I will tell you about probably in the next video. But I wanted to show you, I've got my little eyelets, you know, done here. Are they perfect? Absolutely not, but I think that they're going to hold up. So, you know, ugly as it is, it's going to work. So, for a cord, I thought I had a more neutral shade cord, but I just looked over my stash, and what I have a lot of is this red satin stuff. So I'm going to use that for right now. I can always switch it out later, which is not going to be a problem, but you know, it's going to be bright and cheerful. But before I can lace this up, I need to put that little panel in the back. And so, from my scraps here, I'm just grabbing one to get an idea. If there is a good chance I could have this spread open about like that. It kind of depends on what blouse and bra and all that kind of stuff I'm wearing. But I'm going to have at least that much underneath my laces. And I think what's going to work for me is if I just make this a regular rectangle here and even this out right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and this selvage I can cut off. But I'm going to go ahead and serge around it and then just turn it under, press it, and stitch it. So I just have a single layered flat hem. And I'm going to do that all the way around this way. And that way, it doesn't really matter to me what the inside looks like, but on the outside, it's going to have a nice finished edge. So let me go do that, serge it and press it, and I'll be right back. Okay, so after I serged it all the way around, I decided I'm only hemming the top and bottom. I'm not doing the sides. Why add extra bulk when it's not going to be visible anyway? So that's what I've done. So what I'm going to do is just put this on by hand, and I want to make sure that this little rectangle is behind where all of these laces are. Kind of lined up a little bit with the bottom here. But I want to sew it on so it is far enough back that it's not going to interfere with anything. So if I put it about the same, and I'm only going to sew it on to one side. That looks pretty even to me. This is the side I'm going to be sewing it to. So for right now, I'm going to put a few pins on here from the outside just to hold it in place. Okay, so if I open it up now on the inside, I can see exactly where this needs to end. And I'm going to do this by hand, and I'm going to try to only stitch through the lining, maybe just catching the back of a little bit of this. But this is more or less just to keep this from wanting to fall out. It's not really for structure, so I think just, you know, whip stitching it through the lining itself is going to be fine. And basically I just got it started there, hid my little knot, coming through, picking up some of the lining, coming back over here, just beyond where that serging is, because that's going to hold it in place a little bit, and come back and do it again all the way across. And look, if you've been watching from home, I am down to just my thumbnails with the press-ons. Everything else has come off, and so very happy about that. We're making progress. Okay, so that is stitched on. Can't see it on the outside, which is what I want. Now for this tie, I am just going to put a little bit of tape around the ends. When I find the real long-term solution for what kind of lacing I'm going to use, you know, we'll do something a little more permanent. But for right now, I'm just going to put some nice Scotch tape around to make this end a little bit stiffer so I can thread it up. And I'm assuming that I'm going to need to rethread it every time I put it on, unless I somehow pull this over my head, which I don't think is going to happen. But I want to get an idea of how long I need to cut these laces. So I'm just going to do a quick little experiment here where if I go across and over and over and over and have about 18 inches to make a bow, how long is that? That is about a yard. So I'm thinking if I cut this maybe 2.5 yards, I should have way plenty, and that way I can trim it just to make sure. So that's what I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to lace it up on my dress form. Okay, all right, so here it is. Ah, my camera! Sorry about that. Oh my gosh, I tell you, the perils of filming in the wind. Here it is, so kind of fun. What I would do different, make it longer, you know, my large bust wants to hike everything up, so, you know, it's a little bit too short, but that's okay, it's still fun. And for the purpose of this, which was to do something outside of my normal, you know, that triggered, hearkened, whatever, back to some quality of my ancestral lineage. And I'll throw a picture up of the family members who are of Danish descent and everything. So this is just, you know, a skirt that I've done in the past. Love this skirt, but it is wrinkled because I just pulled it out of the cedar chest. And typically, this vest would be worn with a much more beautiful blouse than what I have on. This is like an Under Armour top. But I wanted to wear something that was, you know, fitted enough you could see how the vest fits. But they would also put a shawl over. So, using the wind as my ally here, I've got this shawl from when my daughter Morgan was living in Italy, you know? So we got that going on. So I think it's fun. I think it's really fun. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'm really curious to see what everyone else was making this month. And that's going to be it. So I'm going to have an announcement video next week. Big exciting changes for the channel coming up. And I can't wait for you to see that. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, every city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.